The coffin was closing, and that's when I realized something worse than death had already happened. Not one familiar face. Not one hand to hold mine. That silence wasn't grief, it was a message. I stood alone in black. My fingers numb, my heart louder than the prayers. People whispered behind me, strangers mostly. They kept looking around, waiting for my family. They never came. Not my parents. Not my brother. Not even the friend who once promised she would always stand by me. I checked my phone again and again. No missed calls. No explanations. Just silence, cold, deliberate silence. My husband's body lay inches away. And somehow I felt more buried than he was. Everyone thinks funerals are about the dead, but they're not. They're about who shows up and who doesn't. 3 days earlier, my mother had called me. Her voice wasn't sad. It was careful. "Are you sure he's really gone?" she asked. That question stayed with me because it wasn't shock I heard, it was doubt. At the cemetery, when the final prayer ended, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. No flowers from my family, no condolences, no excuses, just absence. That night alone in the house that still smelled like him, I finally opened the messages I had been told to ignore. Threads I was warned not to read. Screenshots people said were lies. That's when I saw it. A conversation I was never meant to find. Names I trusted without question. Dates that didn't make sense. And one sentence that made my hands shake so badly I had to sit down. "If he's gone, she'll be next." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I did something far more dangerous. I started listening, and in that moment I finally understood why nobody from my family came to my husband's funeral. Because they weren't mourning, they were hiding. The house felt different after that sentence settled into my bones. Not haunted, organized. Too quiet in the way a room feels when someone has already searched it. I walked slowly, barefoot on cold tile, noticing details I had ignored for years. A drawer that didn't close properly. A picture frame slightly crooked, as if it had been moved and put back in a hurry. My husband had always been careful, almost obsessive about order. That disorder was new. I replayed the message again, reading it word by word as if punctuation might save me. The sender was my best friend. The receiver was my brother. The timestamp was from 2 weeks before the accident that killed my husband. I remembered that week clearly. How everyone suddenly checked on me more than usual. How my mother insisted I stay home. How my husband had looked at me the night before he died and said, "If anything ever happens to me, don't trust the silence." At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. Now, the silence was screaming. The next morning, I didn't call anyone. I didn't confront. Grief is a perfect disguise. It gives you permission to be quiet, distracted, forgetful. I wore it carefully. I replied late to messages. I let my voice sound hollow when people asked how I was holding up. No one questioned it. They expected me to break. They didn't expect me to watch. I started with the accident report. The police had ruled it clean. Single vehicle. Wet road. Poor visibility. A sentence buried at the bottom caught my eye. Brake response delayed. I didn't know much about cars, but I knew my husband. He serviced his car obsessively. Every 3 months, no excuses. I found the receipt in his desk, dated just 5 days before his death. The garage listed on the receipt wasn't the one he usually used. That was mistake number 1. I drove there myself, sunglasses on, hair tied back, pretending to be someone else. The mechanic barely looked at me when I asked about the service. He pulled up the record, frowned, then shrugged. "Car was already fine," he said. "Didn't really need much." I asked what much meant. "Just long enough. Brake fluid." He supped it off. I thanked him and left, my hands steady on the steering wheel, my pulse racing beneath the calm. Brake fluid doesn't just evaporate. Someone has to remove it. On my way home, my phone buzzed. My mother's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Then my best friend, then my brother. 3 calls in 10 minutes. Panic has a rhythm. Once you hear it, you never forget the sound. That night, I opened my laptop and did something I had never done before. I logged into my husband's email. I knew his password, I always had, I just never used it. There were drafts, unsent emails he had written late at night to a lawyer. To someone saved only as R. One draft stopped me cold. "If something happens to me," it read, "please make sure she sees everything. She deserves the truth, even if it costs all of us." The attachment was encrypted. It took me 3 days to break into it. 3 sleepless nights fueled by coffee and rage and the memory of my family's empty faces at the funeral. When it finally opened, I didn't feel relief. I felt confirmation, bank transfers, small amounts spread out, careful. From my husband's account to one I didn't recognize. Then from that account to another. And another. The names on the final transfers were familiar. Too familiar. My mother, my brother, best friend, they weren't just connected. They were coordinated. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, and laughed quietly. Not because it was funny. Because I finally understood the shape of it. This wasn't rage, this was logistics. This was planning. This was betrayal done slowly, patiently, by people who kissed my cheek and told me they loved me. I remembered the last family dinner before my husband died. How my mother insisted on pouring his drink. How my brother asked strange questions about his insurance. How my best friend watched me instead of him, as if measuring something. I had missed all of it. But missing it then didn't mean I had to miss it now. The next step was visibility. I needed to know who was watching me and how closely. I started leaving the house at odd hours. taking different routes, posting harmless updates online at times I wasn't actually home. Within days, patterns emerged. A car parked too often across the street, a number that hung up when I answered, concern disguised as care. My best friend said one afternoon, her voice tight, "You've been so quiet." "I'm trying to heal," I replied. "Isn't that what you wanted?" She paused, just a fraction too long. "Yes," she said. "Of course." That pause told me more than any confession ever could. I began documenting everything. Dates, screenshots, receipts. I backed it up in 3 places. One cloud account under a fake name. One USB hidden where no one would think to look. One copy sent to an email address I had scheduled to forward automatically if I didn't cancel it every 7 days. A dead man's switch. My husband had taught me well. One evening, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No name, no stamp. Inside was a single photo, my husband, taken weeks before his death, sitting across from someone in a cafe. The face across from him was blurred, but I recognized the jacket. I had bought it myself. My brother's. Written on the back in neat handwriting were 5 words: "You're closer than you think." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, the photo in my hand, listening to the house breathe. They knew I was digging. That meant one thing: the clock had started. And this time I wasn't going to be late. Morning came without mercy, no dreams, no rest, just a sharp awareness that settled behind my eyes like a weapon being loaded. I burned the envelope in the sink, watched the photo curl and blacken, and flushed the ashes away. Evidence can be saved, fear cannot. I choose the former. I didn't go to the police, not yet. People like my family don't leave fingerprints, they leave stories. And stories only work if you rush them. I wasn't gonna rush anything again. I went to the bank instead. The woman at the counter smiled with professional boredom until I asked for a full audit of my husband's accounts. Her expression changed when I slid the marriage certificate across the desk. Power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like paperwork done correctly. Within an hour, I had printouts that confirmed what the files already suggested: someone had been siphoning money long before his death. Small amounts, spaced carefully, always below the threshold that triggered alerts. The withdrawals stopped the day after the funeral. They thought the source was gone. On my way out, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't family. It was an unknown number. "You're not as alone as they want you to believe," a man's voice said when I answered, calm, older, controlled. "But you are being watched." "Who is this?" I asked. "A friend of your husband's," he replied. "One he hoped you'd never need." He hung up before I could speak again. I drove aimlessly for a while, making sure I wasn't being followed. When I was certain, I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, replaying his words. "One he hoped you'd never need." That meant contingency. That meant my husband had known things were already in motion. At home, I tore apart his office properly this time. Not grief searching, forensic searching. I found a false bottom in the drawer beneath his files. Inside was a burner phone and a folded piece of paper with a single address and a time written on it. Tomorrow, 9 p.m. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't post, I didn't call. I wore neutral clothes and left my main phone behind. The city after dark feels different when you're no longer pretending it's safe. Every reflection looks like a witness. Every shadow feels intentional. The address led me to a quiet building with a private security desk and no name on the door. The man from the phone call was waiting in the lobby. He recognized me instantly. "You look like him," he said, not unkindly. When he stopped pretending, we sat in a room that smelled like old paper and metal. He laid out a timeline so clean it made me sick. My husband had discovered irregularities months ago. He traced them, confronted no one. Instead, he watched. He recorded calls. He documented meetings. He learned who spoke to whom when they thought no one was listening. He believed if he gathered enough, the man said, could scare them into stopping. And instead, I asked. And instead, they realized he was smarter than they were, he replied. And that scared them. I asked him the question I had been avoiding since the funeral. Was it an accident? He didn't answer immediately. No, he said finally. When I left the building, I felt lighter and heavier all at once. Knowledge does that, it sharpens the edges. I was no longer guessing. I was calculating. The next move had to look like weakness. I invited my family to dinner. My mother arrived first, eyes scanning the house like she expected to find ghosts. My brother came late, apologizing too much. My best friend hugged me tightly, held on a second longer than necessary. Guilt has weight. It always leans in. I cooked my husband's favorite meal. I poured wine. I laughed at the right moments. I told them I was thinking of selling the house, moving away, starting over. Relief flickered across their faces like bad acting. "I just want peace," I said softly. "I'm so tired." They nodded. They understood tiredness. It meant compliance. After dinner, I excused myself and pretended to take a call. From the hallway, I watched them through the mirror. My brother leaned toward my best friend. My mother's hands trembled as she lifted her glass. Soon, my brother whispered. I heard it clearly. "She's breaking." That night, I added another file to my archive. Days passed. I let myself unravel publicly. Missed appointments, unpaid bills, emotional posts online that hinted at desperation. People like my family are hunters, but they only move when they smell blood. I gave them the scent. "They're preparing," the man said. "So should you." I asked him what preparation looked like. Exposure, he answered. But exposure only works if the timing is perfect. The next message came from my best friend. Can we talk? I'm worried about you. I agreed to meet her at a cafe, the same one from the burned photo. I arrived early and sat where my husband had once sat. I ordered nothing. She arrived smiling, sat across from me, and reached for my hand. I let her. You don't have to be strong, she said. You have us. I looked at her carefully, the familiar face, the borrowed concern, the patience of someone waiting for permission. I know, I replied. That's why I need your help. Her eyes lit up, just slightly. I leaned in and told her exactly what she wanted to hear. That I was ready to let go. That I trusted her, that I was done fighting. She nodded, relief washing over her features. She didn't notice the small camera hidden in my bag, or the recorder already running. People never do when they think they've won. When we stood to leave, she hugged me again. This time her grip was loose. You're doing the right thing, she whispered. I smiled. As she walked away, my phone buzzed in my pocket with a new message from the unknown number. Now we wait. And for the first time since the funeral, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. I was afraid of how patient I had become. The next week was a masterclass in patience, observation, and subtle intimidation. I had become invisible while simultaneously controlling everything in plain sight. My family thought I was broken. My best friend believed I was fragile. Every smile I offered was a weapon. Every pause I held in conversation became a trap. I watched them squirm, though they had no idea why. The tension I created wasn't loud. It was surgical, precise, and utterly terrifying. I started with small exposures. Nothing direct. Nothing accusatory, a whisper to the wrong person at the wrong time, a casual mention of a meeting they hadn't expected me to know about. The beauty of intelligence is that it doesn't scream, it lingers. A glance. A hesitation. A dropped word. By the third day, I could see the cracks forming. My brother kept checking over his shoulder. My mother's laughter had lost its confidence. My best friend's texts were frantic, questioning everything she had assumed about me. I dug deeper into their lives. The same way they had dissected my husband and me, I dissected them. Bank accounts, phone logs, social connections, minor discrepancies in timelines. Every conversation I overheard, every glance they shared, every lie they told themselves or me, I logged. I built a dossier of betrayal so comprehensive it could collapse their lives if unleashed. And I didn't unleash it, not yet. One night I found myself in my husband's study again, the room heavy with absence and memory. I opened a drawer he had never touched in years, and there it was, a small black notebook with names, dates, and coded numbers. He had known it all along, all the signals, all the threats. His planning had been meticulous. I realized then that I wasn't just continuing his work, I was elevating it. Where he had been reactive, I would be proactive. Where he had been cautious, I would be audacious. The man from the mysterious phone call reappeared. He left a note under my door. Tonight, the first move. No more guidance. No more explanations. Just a warning. I didn't panic. Instead, I mapped it in my mind. Who would act, and who was already too scared to breathe. Fear is contagious, and I intended to let it spread like wildfire. I didn't leave the house that evening. I lit no lights. I didn't even turn on the television. I sat in my husband's armchair, silent, listening. The clock ticked methodically. I heard it first, the soft click of a door unlocking. Then footsteps, deliberate, hesitant, my mother. She had decided to check on me, to see if I was really all right. I knew because the sound was familiar, the shuffle of her shoes, the weight of her guilt embedded in every step. I didn't confront her, I didn't move. I let her enter, let her speak. She whispered my name, called out to me. Then she froze. That pause, that breathless hesitation told me she knew. She didn't know what I knew, but she knew enough to fear. I finally spoke, calm. Collected, sharper than any blade. You shouldn't be here, I said. She trembled, a small gasp escaping her lips. I was worried, I wanted to. You should leave, I interrupted softly. Before it gets worse for you. The fear was visible, but it didn't satisfy me. Fear alone isn't enough. It needs context, it needs history. It needs proof, and I had it, more than I could ever need. I let her leave, slamming the door behind her, not loud. Just final. I knew that sound would echo in her mind longer than anything else. The following days were a careful choreography. I allowed small interactions, casual greetings, innocent visits. But everything was calculated, every detail observed. I discovered patterns, habits, weaknesses. I learned what made them uncomfortable, where their guilt burned the hottest. And I waited, always waited. Then came the first real sign that my strategy was working. A misstep from my brother, a late-night call he thought I wouldn't notice. He whispered, panicked, to someone on the line. I replayed the voicemail twice before deleting it. His tone revealed panic, but also something worse, confusion. They thought I was weak. That misjudgment was their downfall. I began leaving subtle messages where they couldn't ignore them. A receipt left on the counter that revealed I had accessed accounts they believed private. A newspaper article casually folded with my husband's name highlighted. A letter on the kitchen table with the words, I see everything simple. Silent effective, the psychological effect was immediate. Each of them began moving differently. My mother avoided my gaze. My brother stopped leaving the house after dark. My best friend's smiles grew tighter, her words clipped. One night I received a package at my door. Inside was a small box, no note. I opened it carefully. A recording device. I recognized the voice immediately, my husband. Not alive, not in person, but recorded, his instructions. His warnings, his plan. He had anticipated my response, he had anticipated my patience. He had designed a chain reaction, and I was at the center of it. The recording instructed me to gather evidence, to document everything meticulously, and to prepare for a confrontation that would leave them exposed, vulnerable, powerless. I followed his instructions as if reading a scripture. Every detail mattered. Every subtlety was essential. My husband had created a blueprint for justice, and I would execute it with precision. Weeks passed. I perfected my surveillance, my recording, my presence. I knew where each of them went, what they said, what they hid. Their confidence eroded daily, replaced by paranoia. I watched it grow, silently savoring their unraveling. The final step was approaching, the point where exposure would be undeniable, where betrayal could no longer be denied or disguised, and I would strike not with emotion, but with the weight of truth. Then, one evening, my best friend came to the house. Her approach was tentative, hesitant. I could hear her footsteps on the porch, her breathing shallow, almost reverent. She knocked. I didn't answer immediately. When I did, I opened the door just enough to speak through the crack. "Why are you here?" I asked. She froze. Her rehearsed smile faltered. I wanted to help. I thought you needed me." I studied her. Every micro-expression, every twitch, every sign of deceit. She had no idea that I had recordings of every conversation, that I had traced every action, that I knew her lies before she even spoke them. "Help," I echoed, my voice low. "By pretending, by hiding the truth, by letting him die." Her face paled. She stammered. I didn't, it wasn't supposed to." "Leave," I said, flat, controlled. "Now, before you do more damage." She left shaking, and I closed the door. Her fear was palpable, contagious. And that fear was power. Real power. Because it wasn't just fear of me, it was fear of exposure, fear of consequences, fear of a truth they could never escape. I sat in the living room, the silence surrounding me. My husband's photograph on the mantel seemed to watch over everything. I felt a strange peace. Not relief, not vengeance completed, but control. And I realized for the first time since his death that I was no longer the victim. The next morning, my brother called. His tone was careful, measured. "Can we talk?" he asked. I agreed, knowing full well what he expected. But this time I wasn't just going to talk. I was going to orchestrate every word, every pause, every reaction. Every lie he had ever told me would come back to him reflected, undeniable. As I prepared for the meeting, I reviewed every detail once more. Emails, text, bank statements, recordings, photos, observations. Nothing was missing, nothing overlooked. I was ready. Not just for confrontation, but for revelation, for justice, for the reckoning they had believed would never come. And in that moment, as the sun rose and the house filled with a soft, golden light, I understood something profound. Revenge isn't a single act, it's a symphony. Every note, every silence, every pause contributes to the final performance. And the performance had only just begun. The doorbell rang. I opened it calmly, and my brother stood there, unaware that the game had already ended. He stood there with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, holding a paper bag like an offering. "Coffee, peace treaty." I stepped aside and let him in. Control often looks like hospitality. He sat where my husband used to sit, legs crossed too carefully, hands restless. I noticed everything. The way his gaze flicked to the hallway. The way he avoided the bookshelf. The way he spoke too fast, as if speed could outrun guilt. "I've been worried about you," he said. I nodded, said nothing, poured the coffee he brought without drinking it. Silence does more damage than accusations. He filled it with excuses, stress, confusion, grief. Words people use when they need time. I gave him none. I asked simple questions. Where had he been the night of the accident? Who serviced the car? Why had money moved through accounts that didn't belong to him? Each answer landed wrong. He laughed once, sharp and sudden. "You're spiraling," he said. "You need help." I watched the lie crawl across his face. "I'm getting it," I replied. "From people who tell the truth." His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. He glanced down before he could stop himself. Fear flickered. I stood and walked to the window, letting him feel the space shift. I didn't threaten, I didn't accuse, I said something worse. "I know about the transfers." I said all of them. He froze. The room went still. A car passed outside, oblivious. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "You're mistaken." I turned back calm. I said, "I'm not." He left shortly after, forgetting the coffee. At the door, he tried to look like a brother again. "We should do this again," he said. "As a family." Soon. That word followed him down the steps. Soon has weight when you know it's coming. That afternoon my mother called. Her voice trembled, then steadied. "We need to talk," she said. "In person." We met at a church she liked for its quiet. She sat beneath stained glass and folded her hands like a shield. She spoke about forgiveness, about misunderstandings, about how grief makes monsters of us all. I let her talk until she ran out of air. "You taught me to tell the truth," I said softly. "Remember?" She nodded. Tears formed, carefully placed. "This isn't the time. It's always the time," I replied. "That's what you said when I was a child." Her hands tightened. "You don't understand what you're playing with." I leaned closer. "I understand exactly," I said. I'm playing with people who think love excuses theft, who think silence is consent. She stood abruptly. You'll destroy this family. I watched her walk away. You did that already, I said to the empty pews. The man with the calm voice sent a message that night, a location, a deadline. He didn't explain, he never did. I packed lightly and left before midnight. The city blurred as I drove, streetlights slicing time into pieces. The location was an office above a closed storefront, the kind of place you only notice if you're looking. Inside he laid out the next phase. Not exposure. Not yet. Pressure. Legal, social, financial. The kind that makes people confess because it's easier than holding the lie. He slid a folder toward me. Names of attorneys, journalists who cared about money trails. Regulators who didn't like being embarrassed. I recognized a few. My husband had circled them months ago. They're already cracking, the man said. I replied. Good, he said. Then don't rush. At home the cracks widened. My best friend stopped coming by. My brother canceled plans. My mother sent messages full of prayers and nothing else. I let the space stretch. I posted one photograph online, my husband's watch on my wrist. No caption. Within minutes my phone lit up. Panic has a tell. It's fast. I began receiving anonymous tips. People talk when they think you're about to talk louder. A coworker of my brother's. A neighbor who saw my mother meeting someone late. A clerk who remembered a rushed transaction. I verified everything. Twice truth needs redundancy. One night I found a note taped to my door. Not threatening. Pleading. Please stop. I smiled and peeled it away. Stopping is for people who are wrong. The pressure worked. My best friend broke first. She asked to meet. Neutral ground, afternoon light. I arrived early, chose a table with a clear view of the door. She came in pale, eyes rimmed red, confidence gone. I didn't mean for this, she said immediately. You have to believe me? I sipped water. Meanings don't move money? I said. People do. She flinched. He was going to leave you, she whispered. That's what they said. They, I asked. She swallowed. Your brother, your mother. They said it was only supposed to scare him. Silence fell. Heavy, she realized what she had said, her hands shook. I didn't interrupt. Confessions need room. He figured it out, she continued. He knew, he confronted them, they panicked. I turned on my recorder without looking. Go on, she cried then, messy, unconvincing. I didn't know about the car, she said. Swear. That didn't help her. When we parted, she reached for me. I stepped back. Boundaries are a language people understand when nothing else works. The next morning, my mother showed up unannounced. She looked smaller. Older, fear had finally taken its tax. She tried to hug me, I let her. It felt like hugging a stranger. We can fix this, she said into my shoulder. I stepped away. You can tell the truth, I replied. That's the only fix. Her eyes searched my face for mercy. I gave her clarity instead. It's moving, I said. All of it. Lawyers. People who ask questions for a living. She nodded slowly. What do you want? I thought of my husband's last smile. Of the drafts he never sent. Of the watch on my wrist, ticking faithfully. I want you to be honest, I said, publicly. She closed her eyes. They won't forgive me. I tilted my head. Neither will I said. But forgiveness isn't the point. That night I listened to the city breathe and felt something settle. Not peace. Readiness. The files were complete. The story was airtight. All that remained was timing. My phone buzzed once more. The calm voice. Tomorrow I stood by the window and watched dawn gather itself. The symphony was nearly ready. I could hear the first notes tuning in the distance. And for the first time, I wondered which of them would speak first when the lights came on. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. The morning broke clean and unforgiving. I dressed carefully, not in black this time, but in something neutral, unmemorable. Power doesn't announce itself with costumes. It arrives quietly and sits down at the table. When I left the house, I locked the door behind me and felt no hesitation. Everything I needed was already in motion. The meeting was held in a glass conference room downtown, the kind designed to make people feel exposed. My brother arrived first, jaw tight, eyes darting. My mother came next, hands clasped, lips moving as if rehearsing prayers. My best friend was last. She avoided my eyes completely. Lawyers sat at either end of the table, a regulator and auditor, and the man with the calm voice finally visible, seated beside me like punctuation at the end of a sentence. No one spoke at first. Then the screen lit up. Bank records appeared, clean and chronological. Transfers traced, accounts mapped, names highlighted. Dates aligned with conversations, locations, receipts. Audio played next, snippets, short and devastating. My brother's voice, nervous and calculating. My mother's, steady and cold. My best friend's, pleading and small. Each clip was brief. Long enough to be undeniable, short enough to leave no room for interpretation. My brother stood abruptly. This is a setup, he said, pointing at me. She's manipulating. The auditor cut him off. She said. Or leave. Either way, this continues. He sat. The man beside me slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs from the garage, service logs. Testimony from a mechanic who had decided honesty was cheaper than prison. Another folder followed, insurance inquiries, emails asking the wrong questions too early, drafts of plans that never should have existed. My mother's face drained of color. My best friend began to cry again, but no one looked at her. When the accident reconstruction appeared, the room changed. Brake fluid levels, tampering patterns. Expert analysis delivered in a voice so calm it felt cruel. The conclusion arrived without drama, not an accident and intervention. My mother reached for me across the table. I didn't move. I didn't want him dead, she said. I wanted him gone. He was tearing us apart. I finally is protecting me, I said. From you? Silence answered. The consequences followed, methodical and precise. Charges explained. Rights read. Options narrowed. My brother tried bargaining. My best friend collapsed inward, whispering apologies to no one. My mother stared at the glass walls like she could pray them opaque. I watched it all without satisfaction. Justice isn't satisfying, it's clarifying. When it was over, when signatures were signed and escorts arrived, the man with the calm voice stood. Your husband planned for this, he said quietly. He just hoped you'd never have to finish it. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent and bright. I walked alone for a while, breathing air that felt new. My phone buzzed with messages, news alerts, questions. A few apologies sent too late to matter. I didn't answer, I went home instead. The house no longer felt organized by someone else's hands, it felt mine. I opened the window in the study and let the light touch the desk where my husband once sat. I placed his watch beside the notebook and closed both. Some chapters don't need rereading. Days later, the funeral finally happened the way it should have. Not for my husband, he had already been honored by the truth, but for the lie that had followed me. People came, some out of curiosity, some out of remorse, some because they finally understood. I stood straight and accepted none of it personally. Grief teaches you the difference between presence and loyalty. I visited my husband's grave alone at sunset. I told him what I had done, not as confession but as completion. I told him I was safe. I told him the silence had been broken. The wind moved the grass like a response. When I turned to leave, I didn't feel watched, I felt finished. Revenge had never been the point, survival had been. And the truth, once spoken, had done what it always does. It ended the story.